And how Lil, who was this great woman in jazz, born in Memphis, she played on every bar a Blue Yodel No. 9 that most people agree is the most iconic and important country single of all time, that all the rest derive from it. And at the beginning is a Black woman. But what's wild to me is this was commonly known in Black show business Detroit because, of course, Lil Hardin talked about it. Of course, she talked about Herb Jeffries, who she discovered in Detroit. They sent up to Earl Father Hines, and he starts making the Bronze Buckaroo movies a few years later because Louie and Lil have told him about what they did in country. 59, Ray Charles has a #1 on Lil's Just for a Thrill. A couple years later, he's making modern sounds in country and Western music. And up until now, the country music establishment is not recognizing the woman who launched Ray Charles into country, the woman who played on Blue Yodel No. 9, the woman who launched the Bronze Buckaroo into the world. He was once so famous, Herbie Hancock is named for Herb Jeffries. But that's the work that you uniquely are doing, are getting Euclid's of providing the intellectual archive receipts of our presence throughout the Western canon. You have done more to create the broadest. I'm in one little narrow lane, and you have actually held down an entire map of our impact on the Western mind and the global mind.
Ms. Randall, thank you in ways that go beyond verbal description. I felt that that book, The Unseen Truth in particular, could land me in the witness protection program because of the level of excavation and exposure that I intended to provide in the through the archive. That footnotes are nearly 100 pages to dramatize this for those who are listening who haven't read. But to hear you affirm the work in that way, because it comes from both a scholarly impulse but a soulful impulse as well, it just means so much. Like the work too, the labor involved, wasn't just about the spade work in the archive. I was met with so many moments of surprising denial all of a sudden when it was revealed that I was examining this question of the fiction underneath the entire seemingly factual regime of racial hierarchy. It was, oh no, we can't give her access to this photograph or this document, which only dramatized the need to do this work even more. So we both share in your exquisite work this need to, as you just so aptly put it, acknowledge the unseen. Can you tell me more about the way that you employ that term acknowledge? When you're describing My Black Country, you were using the term acknowledge to think through the unseen history. Can you tell me a bit more about the power of that?
Well, it's what is known and unspoken, known and undocumented, known and erased.
Yeah.
And there is within that word acknowledgement a sense of respect and the idea there is actually shared and known truth, knowledge that has been denied. Because one of the things that is interesting is the amount of Boyd Acuff knew when he did not mention D. Ford Bailey at the when they were having the anniversaries of the Opry, that D. Ford Bailey had established his own, had helped launch Boyd Acuff's own career. This is not something that was, I'm interested in the things, you often uncover things that are even unknown. I'm also interested in things that are known and not told, known and denied. That all country music is actually Black country. There's no country music without Black influences, literally none. And what's interesting to this is that people who were most intimately involved in constructing country knew this. And it's only actually, in that case, the scholars, I think Bill C. Malone may not have known because he came out of the academy. He wasn't coming out of the street and knowing real musicians. He didn't know about some of these things. But so it's funny how I like that acknowledgement has something to do with respect, something to do with what are we going to accept as documentation. But we were having a conversation earlier, and I was saying that joy is radical. And he said, well, do you think joy makes it easier or harder to change things? I think easier. And they said, well, what's your proof of that? A lot of things it's hard to prove, the ineffable. But I would say the 8 or 9 books, because I get up and do things because I'm running towards this shared truth.
Yeah. You have to have an affirmative platform on which to stand. I was teaching for a little bit at Yale School of Art. And at the time, there was a symposium about like negation. Right? And I laugh thinking about it now because the title was very, deeply academic and the kind of thing you read out loud to, your mom or grandmom, they kind of laugh at it. But I remember it so vividly because in the studio with the artist, we were talking about how difficult it is to rest your work on critique alone. You have to find a way to believe with conviction in what it is that you have to say that's affirmative. And that gets close to and is a form of a kind of joy, right?
And I love and I love if you share with listeners who haven't had a chance to read, parsing this difference that I think is so significant between mastery and perfection and this ongoing process of creation. Can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, sure. No, this idea of mastery is at the heart of the first book I wrote, The Rise. And that book, which came out, in 2014 and did work, or 15, that I didn't expect in the world, was really born of understanding the need for this distinction in our minds between success and mastery. Not just for artists, but for anyone who wants to live their life as a creator and someone who understands that we create our lives. I think the training I had as a young girl really focused me on the idea of achievement and success. And as I began to work in the arts, I realized that in fact, what propels the journey is what I would call the near win. Right? The unfinished, what actually still stays with you as propulsion, giving you giving you fuel for the next attempt. And it made in the book. So I distinguish between success and mastery because mastery is the journey of the creative who knows that the journey is always unfinished. And that's not just in the lifespan we have, but from generation to generation. I mean, George Kluber has this idea of sort of prime objects. So these kind of central questions that we engage with from age to age. So there's still this inbuilt sense of the unfinished that we don't often talk about, even there too.
And that unfolding. And that is
an unfolding.
The unfolding. I think at the end, I talk about we make art like we make a bed every day. And we make a bed like we make, we make saying like we make a bed every day. Yeah. And we make art like we make saying. And that is how, for me, that sometimes what is too hard to bear becomes beauty that makes the hard bearable. But that process has to be created every day.
That's right. And part of the detonation of the book, I mean, it surprised me, the response to it. It's been translated in all these languages. But the interest in the mastery concept was gratifying because it was a kind of radical way to think about the creative process at the time, especially as it relates to race, frankly. I think a lot of people wonder, well, how's she going to talk about mastery, this young Black woman? But the idea there, too, that detonated was that the many works we consider to be classics, iconic, in fact, are near wins in the mind's eye of the creator. So I'm sure a lot of songs are this way, too. And the work I know in terms of visual culture, anyone who's listening who's seen a Paul Cézanne painting likely is looking at a near win because he didn't sign 90% of his paintings because he thought they were failures, right? So, and that propels the journey. Franz Kafka, same thing. William Faulkner, same thing. So
there's a myth that it's probably mythological, but they say, how do you pick a surgeon to train to be a surgeon? And I remember hearing this story. It was ask someone to think of 3 mistakes they made last week. And then, or think of a mistake, then another mistake, and another. And the great surgeon is one who can think of 3 or more. And about the thing that's most important, because people who really care deeply, I would love to re-edit all my sons. And it's very interesting. I think that it is always the process. It's always the next one. You mentioned earlier an interview I'd done I never look at those things because I'm on to the next thing. In my own house, in the apartment I live in now, which is not my daughter lives in the house that I raised her in with 10,000 books. No one can move out of that house because there's too many books to move out. But in my own small, 2-bedroom apartment, I finally had to bring in my books, my own person that I had written, because when I'm doing an interview there and I need to refer to something, because I'm into the new, what I'm creating now in the manuscript. And for me, uh, I am at 27, 32 drafts, of a manuscript and that whole process, I know success is a matter for me of failing at higher and higher levels. In embracing the uprising. But I do think your book, The Rise, in this current political moment, is something I suggest that people go to for a variety of reasons, but most keenly because I think it's time for us to embrace our own lives as works of audacious art. And that the process you described for creatives is something that people that can inform and provide insight and wisdom to people creating this. I think the only way forward right now is to self-medicate with art, both to bring in art that already exists and to embrace this moment. It's not reason that we can't abandon reason and strategy and analysis, but we need inspiration. We need radical new paths forward because we have had, there's been radical, unpredictable, negative forces coming in.
Yeah.
And we must eclipse the negative with wild and positive, fecund imaginings.
Yeah. Absolutely. The case that comes to mind, the example that's most vivid when you say that, is I do think about and write about Frederick Douglass in there, politics in terms of failure, societal failure, which effectively it is. We're in a moment of societal failure to a certain degree in terms of the crisis we're in. Is actually a figure you might not expect me to say, Ben Saunders. There's an Arctic explorer. I write about it in this chapter on surrender, which is another way to also engage with the idea of mastery. When you constantly are faced with the blank page and the near win, it can feel defeating, right? And so the question is, how do you remain in a state of that radical joy in order to propel yourself forward? Surrender is key for that, which isn't giving up, but giving over to a larger condition and then to harness the power you have to focus on what is meant for you. Ben Saunders is such a powerful, for me, example of that. He is a polar explorer, one of the only people in the world to have trudged to the North Pole and back on foot solo, South Pole as well.